Hey everybody, it's Vanessa, the Crafty Gemini. Welcome to my 200th episode of WIP Wednesday here live on the Crafty Gemini YouTube channel and the Crafty Gemini Facebook page. 200 episodes. For today's show, we wanted to do a little something different. We have a form that some of you may be familiar with where people submit questions. Let me lower this thing on my chat, where people submit questions. Now, some of the questions that we receive from y'all, we obviously read through all of them. I have one of my team members go in and kind of categorize them, whether it's quilting, clothes making, zippers, bags, whatever it is. And so some of them I can't really answer because it's not going to take up that much time to do on a live show. And so we've compiled a good list of these where I can just give you some quicker answers. I pulled a few different samples to show you what I'm talking about as I answer those. And then as I'm going through this list of questions, we are going to stop and go through the chat, and my partner over here is going to help me pick out some different usernames from those of you that are tuned in live for some giveaway prizes. So I have five different giveaway prizes, and I have about 15 questions or so. So maybe like after every 3 questions or something, we'll stop and do a giveaway. So welcome to everybody. Let's make sure that y'all can see me and hear me so we can get on with today's show. So let me know if you can see me and hear me. All right, we got Tamara in the house. Thank you, Tamara. She says, great idea for a Q&A. Hi, Janice. Thanks for tuning in. All right. Thank you, everybody who's saying congrats on 200. Now, for going live every week, and there's 52 weeks in the year, plus holidays and all that, we have had to cancel different episodes for all kinds of stuff. Back in the days, years ago when we first started, was like for kids' sports, meetings. We've had to cancel because we've had no power here. We've had to cancel because we've had no power because of a hurricane here, you know. In rural north central Florida, the power goes out. It could be a nice clear day and the power will go out. So we've canceled several shows all, here and there throughout the year. But for the most part, we're here every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern time. So I'm glad that y'all are here today to join us for today's 200th episode. And thank you all who tune in every Wednesday that keep us going. Okay. So thanks to everybody. Hi, thank you. We got friends tuning in from Dallas-Fort Worth area. Janelle, hey Janelle, tuning in from Illinois. Hi, Claire from New Zealand. I saw somebody earlier from Australia, so they're catching me tomorrow here. Irene from Texas, great, and y'all can see me and hear me. So let's start it off with a giveaway before we jump into the questions. Why not? From all the friends that mentioned there, go ahead and just scroll, and wherever the mouse stops, just tell me the username, and I'm going to try and keep a little note here. If you are a giveaway winner, you just need to email us with your name and mailing address to bea@craftygemini.com. So BEAB@craftygemini.com, and let us know, hey, I'm so-and-so, here's my address, I won whatever giveaway prize. Okay, great. You got one. Who is it? Who is our lucky winner for the first bundle? Zena W. Hi, Zena. I didn't even see where she's on here. Well, oh, there you are. She says, you're telling the truth about the electricity. Hi, Zena. Awesome. So the first bundle, I'll show you what it is a bundle of a bunch of goodies. You have some faux leather sheets in here. I think there's like 3 or 4 different fabrics in here. Chunks of fabrics. We have a little magnetic suction thingy that you can stick to the side of your sewing machine for your little scissor snips or pins. We have the little thread snips, Crafty Gemini pen. This is a magnetic bottle cap opener that you can stick on your refrigerator. We have a little notepad, a little notebook. So just some different goodies here for you, Miss Zena. So go ahead and email us at b@craftygemini.com and with your mailing address, or we know who you are too, so he can look it up, and I'll just put number 1 by Zena so we keep track of who won what. And so we'll get this bundle mailed out to you. Okay, so hope you enjoy your new goodies, and thank you for tuning in. All right, let's jump right into our questions. So the first question I have here is from Marie, and Marie asks, after making 2 bobby tops, for those of you that don't know, that's the Jali Bobby. It's a stretch knit, slight V-neck top that has like a little built-in shelf shirt underneath. They're super comfy. I have several of them. But she says, after making 2 of the Jali Bobby tops and 2 Westchester Dolman tops, I have some sizable pieces of DBP left over. So the Westchester Dolman top is a free PDF pattern. That's one of my patterns that anybody can download for free off the site, and I have a step-by-step video lesson. It's like 7 videos, 7 video lessons in the series, I believe, and that you can find that for free also on YouTube. And so both of those are made with stretch knit fabric. So she's saying, you know, obviously you're cutting out these kind of odd shaped pieces. And so from the yardage, she has some DBP left over. For those that don't know, DBP stands for double brush poly spandex. So it's, I was going to look to see what I was wearing it, but yesterday I was wearing a DBP top, not today. It's like a double brushed fabric. So meaning it's super, super soft. It's very lightweight. And it usually is about 95% polyester, 5% spandex, or 96% polyester, 4% spandex. Anyways, she's asking, I have these scraps. She says she's made dog bandanas and some headbands. Do you have other suggestions for using the fabric? Thanks for all your great classes and tips. Well, you're welcome, Marie. I was going to say headbands. As soon as I started to read her question earlier, I was like, headbands for sure. Another option would be to make scrunchies. Anything that you're going to stretch already is going to work really well with the double brush poly spandex, because the DBP fabric tends to have a lot of stretch. And I'm trying to see if I have a chunk here somewhere. I don't right off the bat. Look at me. I cleaned up and organized a little, so my stuff is put away. Okay. I was going to say yarn cozies. Also, I have a free tutorial for that on my YouTube channel. And that is just basically like a little loop that you can stretch and put a little cake or a ball of yarn inside. If you tend to work with the yarn from the inside, if you crochet or knit, or if you have friends and family who do, that would be a great little gift to make and give them. But the other things I was thinking of, especially for smaller chunk pieces like that, is going to be things like the headbands, the scrunchies. What else could you do? Those were the first ones that came to mind. She had already said headband. If anybody has any other suggestions for Marie here for using smaller pieces of the double brush poly spandex, let us know below. Usually if you have leftover pieces of cotton spandex, which is going to be that 95.5 or 96.4 fiber content split, it will be the majority cotton with a little bit of the spandex. And because it's majority cotton, for those kinds of scraps, I would recommend the same types of projects, headbands, little yarn cozies, scrunchies, and things like that. But I would even recommend like underwear and undergarments, like a little bralette top and things like that from the cotton spandex. If you made a little bralette in the polyester spandex or the DBP, like the double brush poly spandex, that would work too, but I wouldn't recommend it for underwear, okay? Because it's mostly polyester, all right? So things like that. Let's see. Oh, let's see. Heidi and Deanna are saying socks. You know, I have a little freebie, like a super, super low no-show sock pattern that's free with the tutorial to go with it. So check that out. I know those, we usually make them out of cotton spandex scraps, but for your feet, unless your feet tend to sweat a lot, you know, you could try and make some out of the DBP also, okay? Yeah, Lorette is saying like socks for around the house. Yeah. Winless Original says she's made the socks from the DBP too, so that would be a good one then to try. Yeah. So give that a go. We've also made some, they're like headbands, but it's more like a wrap. It's like a longer tube instead of being like a fine headband that you just wear here. It's like a big one that we use for everybody here in my house who has like a lot of curly hair. It's like a way for you to just slip the whole thing on and keep it covered. You know, my kids always wore them when they were younger, especially when their hair was all in locks or loose in curls, for doing all the farm chores. You don't want the hay and the leaves and all that junk getting in your hair. So it's like a headband, but it's way longer, like a wrap. So think along those lines. Okay. All right. Karen says sofa pillow cover. So you know what? Actually, if you had pillow forms or you had a decorative pillow already on the couch that you wanted to make like a new cover for, the DBP would actually work really good for that too. Now that I'm thinking about it, because it's super smooth and soft to touch, but it's a pillow, right? It's not going to be on you the entire time. And that way you could just make like a slip cover for it. That would also work, especially if it's puffy. It's going to give it a nice stretch to the fabric so it'll fit nice and snug around it, okay? Obviously, as long as you have like the right measurements and don't make it way too big, then the fabric is going to kind of hang and drape down over it. Okay, so good. Those are all really good suggestions. So hopefully you'll give those a try, Marie. All right, next question I have here is from Amanda. And Amanda says, I watched your video on how to measure the degree of stretch for stretch knits using the cutting mat. I believe I've got that down pat. Wonderful explanation, by the way. Thank you. She says, however, when I go to the fabric store, I don't have my cutting mat with me. Do you have any suggestions on how to measure it in the store? She says, should I just take a bolt of fabric to the cutting station and measure it? I don't want to be a bother to the cutting station person, but also any tips about, okay, let's answer those questions first. What I do is I usually take either a short hard ruler, like a little 6-inch one, even sometimes like the one for foundation paper piecing like this. Something that I can have in my purse that's nice and little. And if y'all know how I like to measure the stretch percentage on knit fabrics, you know that I tend to use the 1-inch square blocks on my cutting mat, and we go with 4. But because this is a 6-inch ruler, I can use the 4 inches off the ruler here to measure my stretch, okay? And usually I'm only looking for 50 to 100% anyway, so if I can stretch it here to here, then I know to the 5 inches, that's gonna be 100% or 50% stretch. And then, excuse me, I'm losing my mind. It's going to be 25% stretch. I'm looking at these numbers backwards. And then if I can go from here to here, it's going to be the 50% stretch. So you'll know, like if it goes way past something like this little, then you'll know, oh, okay, this has like 60, 75%, you know, and you can just eyeball it. You usually just need to get a ballpark figure to know, especially if you're doing something like we do with our garment sewing classes. If we're making, say, a jolie pattern that calls for 50% or even 175%, it'll tell you what the minimum amount of stretch is that you want to go for. So if the pattern tells you 30% stretch and you grab it and you see that you can already kind of pull from this much, 4 inches, and go here, you're like, okay, that's way more than 30. So you know that at least in that direction, in that grain line, you're going to have more than the minimum that it calls for, okay? So it doesn't have to be exactly what it calls for. It just needs to be at least that much. And especially if it's a garment that has a silhouette that's going to be a little bit more loose fitting, or if it's going to hang, then you know that it can be a little bit bigger because it's going to be a little bit more looser fitting anyways, okay? Yes, so that's what I do. I always take either like a hard ruler like that, and that way I can kind of hold, right? I'll like lean on the bolt and kind of grab it and just stretch it right there while I'm there. I don't like to take like a floppy, like a fabric-y measuring tape. Let me grab one. Like something that's soft like this, which is what a lot of people would think to do because it's more pliable, right? And it's easier to grab and you can throw the whole thing in your bag or whatever. But because I'm like usually holding the bolt and doing that, this is not really that easy for me to try and hold with 1.5 hands while I'm doing other stuff. So if you do just have a measuring tape and you don't have like a little ruler like that, just take it over to the cutting table. I've done that plenty of times too. And usually there's some portion of the cutting table at the fabric store that is not in use. You can just lean on the little corner just so that you have a little bit of a hard surface to put your ruler on and just check the stretch real quick. Okay, so that is what I do. So hopefully that works. Yep. Kim says she carries a mini tape measure. Jackie says that their Joann's used to have wire shelving. She used 4 of the openings to do the same measurement as with the cutting mat. Okay. So there were like inch increments like that in the metal. Yes. So a little small hard ruler is going to work great. I don't like taking longer ones because depending on my bag, I don't want it to snap. Make sense? So that's why I take the little ones. Okay. Let me put that there. Okay. Now, her next question there about the fabric was, do you have any tips about ordering from online fabric retailers? I've noticed that some will include the degree of stretch and others will not. That's pretty much how it goes. She says sometimes they just have percentages of what types of fiber is in it. For example, 95% cotton, 5% spandex. Thanks for considering my questions. Yeah, so that is like the bare minimum. If I see something that says 95% cotton, 5% spandex, I know that it's cotton jersey or cotton spandex. And because I've used so much of it over the years, lighter versions, slightly thicker versions, but I have a general idea of how much it's going to stretch. Usually about like 75% in the crosswise direction and maybe 40 to 50% in the other ways. So like right off the bat, I am familiar with the fabric enough to know, yes, this will work for my project or not, okay? But the other thing is to try and seek out fabric retailers that give you a little bit more information. The majority of them will tell you at least the fiber content makeup, okay? So if you're familiar with the fiber content makeup or you see that it says spandex, you already know it's gonna it's going to stretch a good bit, you know, because it has a spandex in it. Where it becomes tricky, I think, is where we see stretch knit fabrics. It says 4-way stretch, and that's it. So, I mean, it could stretch 15%. It could have mechanical stretch in it. But if I don't see spandex, elastane, or there's another term, because they're like trademark terms. So one is spandex, one is elastane, and the other one is, something else. Somebody help me out in the chat. I can't remember. But those words in there are going to tell you that it actually has good stretch return, because that part of the fiber mix is going to allow it to stretch, and when you let it go, it bounces back. So if you're looking for something with good stretch recovery, that's going to be your best bet. Don't just go for like a cotton knit that says 100% cotton. I get that a lot from people that are like, well, I just want to wear 100% cotton, but I want it to be stretch. Well, if it doesn't have that spandex or elastane in it, it's not going to bounce back. So yes, it could be knit and be 100% cotton. It's going to have some stretch, but usually those fabrics, when you stretch them, they stay stretched out. Or worse, you wash it, you dry it, you made it, it looks cute, and as you're wearing it throughout the day, anywhere where there's gravity and kind of rounded portions, it will stretch out. Have you ever had a pair of like loungewear pants where as you're walking with them all throughout the day, then you like stop and have your legs straight and you look down and the knees are like sticking out, like pointy out, because every time you bend your knee, it's pushing out and stretching that fabric. Yes, lycra, thank you. How did I not know that? In Spanish, literally, we call stretch fabric, we just call it lycra. So yes, or lycra, that's the trademark name. So yeah, so you want to have some type of that spandex, elastane, or lycra in it so that it, you know, you're getting a stretch return. So be careful with that. But yeah, then I would say, you know, just seek out some online fabric retailers that give you more information. We, whenever we do carry the stretch fabrics, y'all know that I will literally sit there with every single fabric that I have in stock that I'm selling for a kid or for a class or something, and I will measure it myself. So I will tell you in there every time we list it exactly how much it has along the crosswise grain. And when I say how much it has, I mean how much stretch percentage it has along the crosswise grain as well as the lengthwise grain. So at least for me, when we do list stuff like that, you know what it is. Okay. Next question. This is the third question I have here is from Danita. And Danita says, I have been quilting for years. I like the cutting, the piecing, the free motion quilting, and even the binding. However, the most daunting part of this whole process is the quilt sandwich. I get so anxious that I find myself procrastinating putting the last border on the quilt. I am okay with the smaller projects, but the larger quilts, not so much. She says, I live in a small apartment, so I don't have much room to spread out. Any tips? So I like that she says that she's okay with the smaller projects, because I was going to recommend starting with more smaller projects. Once you do like a larger table runner, I feel like walking yourself through the steps of how to create that quilt sandwich and hold it together for the quilting part of it, that helps you build up the confidence that you need to go further in either quilting, whether it's by hand or by machine, to then finally bind it. But the key is going to be, and I will continue to say this since I have been quilting for almost 20 years now, it's just to do it. It's just to do it. Even if you don't have a project, like all our projects are special, right? We choose out the fabrics, we make it, we spend a lot of time and energy and love making these projects, but a lot of people get to that step of combining the 3 layers to make that quilt sandwich, and then they freak out because they feel like, I've spent so much time, I spent so much money, I don't want to wreck the fabric, I don't want to have to remake this, that then they are at a complete standstill. So I think part of that has to do with making sure that you have a variety of skills to help you put the quilt sandwich together and quilt it in a simpler way. Not everybody is going to spend 10,000 hours sitting at a machine working on their free motion quilting skills. It takes a lot, and by a lot I mean a whole lot, of practice to really nail down free motion quilting. A lot of us get long arms, and that still has a learning curve, but I still find that the long arm is easier for beginners to learn how to quilt on than the sit down free motion quilting, because you're working backwards in your head when you're moving the quilt, okay? And the needle is like the pencil. So for example, if this is my quilt and this is the needle, I'm used to, okay, as a human who went to school here, grabbing something and writing and, you know, making movements with the pen to draw on it. So that's what we do with the long arm, okay? The long arm, I have handles on a pen, basically on my needle, and I move it around so that I'm doodling. And if you were a doodler as a kid, that's a great way to get into quilting, is with a long arm, okay? So the other option is the sit-down free motion quilting, where now imagine the pen is stationary and you're responsible for moving the paper back and forth. So as you already know, if you're wanting to draw the line this way, I don't pull the paper this way. I have to pull it opposite. So it's like when you're first learning how to drive and you have to hit reverse. And then you're like, oh no, the other way. You know, like you start going one way and you're like, no, we're backing up. I have to turn it the other way. You have to make that switch in your mind when you're practicing that sit down free motion quilting. But all that to say, you don't have to do one or the other in order to finish your quilts. You can hand tie a quilt. You can machine stitch a quilt without free motion quilting. Okay, I have a lot of videos. I've done classes. I have, even if you do want to get into free motion quilting, I have like a 7-part video series for free on my YouTube channel on different exercises to get you making that switch in your head, so that you learn a couple of different simple exercises to start free motion quilting, you know, smaller projects to then build up to do your big quilts. But there's tons of different ways that you can still quilt that quilt sandwich. The part of where she says that she has a small space so she can't really spread out the whole thing, I mean, there's no way around that. You're going to need to clear out something. Some people do it on their bed. I don't recommend doing it on a bed just because the mattress can be kind of like squishy, you know what I mean? And you're not going to get that taut surface that you want. If you have a large breakfast counter, that may work depending on the size of the quilt. If you have a dining room table that you can take everything off of and spread out your backing there to begin with, a lot of people will even move furniture out of the way and tape down their backing to the floor. So they are making sure that they're starting off with a fully taut backing. And then you layer your batting, smooth everything out super good, you know, and then you go in with the quilt top. Now, I'm someone who, obviously, I have long arm machines, so I tend to go to the long arm because I have the tools to do it easily and quickly. But when I do something where I'm going to hand quilt it, or even if I'm going to machine quilt it on a sit-down machine, I like to hand baste. If you've never hand basted and you're thinking there's no way, it's a lot faster and a lot easier, I think, than doing little pins with little things on the end, than having the little tool to clip the safety pin thing. Those are just way too cumbersome and they require specialty tools. For me, a hand sewing needle, some thread, and we're off to the races, okay? Is how I do it. Look up on YouTube, type in Crafty Gemini, hand basting, quilt. My videos will pop up for you. So that is what I would recommend, is finding some type of a taut, flat, hard space to start off with the backing, build it up from there, and hand baste it. Those are going to be my recommendations to getting everything held together good. And then you can, you know, hand quilt, do it by machine, free motion, straight stitch, you know, some people like to stitch in the ditch. I personally find that beginners do really well with slightly wavy lines because you're not required to kind of follow a guide. Or when you have the straight seams of your patchwork blocks, a lot of times when people are like, I'm sewing straight, but the lines aren't straight because maybe their piecing wasn't straight. And then you feel horrible because it doesn't look straight and da-da-da-da-da. So skip all that. Don't guilt yourself into feeling super bad about how you're messing up this quilt, and instead do slightly wavy lines. That way you don't have a guide that the waves are being measured from, and it's just like a slight stipple that anybody can do on a home sewing machine with a walking foot is how I would recommend it. Okay? So yeah, if you're wanting to learn some of these tips, because I see Gladys is on here saying she's never quilted, she would love to learn. I'm actually, and I'll just pop it in here, shameless plug, we're in the middle of a new class that I just opened for my Tumbling Frames Quilt course. The price is $20 off right now. It goes back up by 20 bucks. So it's $47 right now. It's going back up to the regular price of $67 tomorrow night at midnight. So if you're watching us live here and you're thinking about getting into quilting, I would recommend the class. If you signed up today or tomorrow, you can already log in and access 9 different video lessons for the blocks. And I'll just grab this here real quick. I showed this the other day. We just went live. Was it? Yes, I can't even remember what days. Everything just melts together. But a simple quilt, the blocks finished 12 inches square, and I'm doing a bonus where I'm giving you another little PDF resource where you could also make, I show you with the measurements, what you need to cut your pieces to and all that for making these same 2 blocks, but in 6-inch and 9-inch finished. So if you're somebody who wants to try that, but you're thinking, too much fabric or it's big blocks, I don't want to get into a whole quilt, you can make a couple of the little ones, put it together and just see how it goes from there. But again, in all my classes, I walk everybody through, every single step. So keep that in mind, and I will be sharing different ways to finish these quilts, okay? Obviously, I'll share some with the long arm stuff, but also some options for you to finish on your home sewing machine, okay? Okay, so that was that, Danita. So hopefully I gave you some tips there on how you could tackle some quilts, right? And finish them off even living in a small apartment. Okay, so that was 3 questions. Let's go ahead and do another giveaway. Can you pull another name from the chat for me, please? Let's see. He says, wow. Heather Pang. The mouse cursor stopped on Heather Pang. Hi, Heather. Let me show you your prize, and I'm just writing down Heather Pang number 2. So remember to email us at bea@craftygemini.com. Just say, hey, it's me, it's Heather. I won number 2, which is this bundle. You get, I'll lift it up so you can see, a whole roll of the 2.5-inch wide organic cotton katarin on a roll, the Bozel 2.5-inch wide batting strips. You already know what to do with that. Lots of different fun little projects. You get a pair of machine quilting gloves that have like the little kind of grippy dots on them for free motion quilting if you want to do free motion quilting on yours. A clapper, another one. I'm pretty sure Heather has a clapper, but a clapper, a small wooden clapper, and then one more thing here, and this is from Sew Tights. It's a magnetic straight pin holder. So it's a magnet here, but it also goes on, like you can put on your clothes or even just put it next to your sewing machine or whatever, so you can throw your pins and it will stick right on there with a magnet. So congrats, Heather. This is your bundle. Yay, giveaways. We haven't done giveaways in a while. It's so fun. Okay, so that's number 2. Awesome. Thank you, Sherilyn. She says, I love your hand basting technique. If you've never tried it, y'all, and you're hearing hand basting, you're thinking hand sewing, I hate it. It's not hand sewing. The only hand part is that you need your hand in order to get it through the quilt. But we're doing big bites and the layers just hold, okay? They stay really good. And I'll just tell you this. When I started hand basting my quilts, I would take quilts in project bags with me when I traveled. And I would hand quilt a quilt. The hand basting held 3 layers together of a lap size quilt easily that I could have on my lap in the airport or in the airplane, not have to drape it out completely open, no pins to stab me or anybody sitting next to me, and I could sit there and hand quilt. And when I tell you all the layers held, from folding, unfolding, draping it half open, as I was working around the different portions of the quilt to hand quilt it, after I did that one time, I was like, I'm convinced hand basting is the way to go. So just a little info there in case anybody wants to try it, okay? All right, so, let's keep going. My next question here is from Jackie. It's a quilting question, and Jackie says, binding your quilt project this has to do with her question, I guess. Binding your quilt or project entirely on your sewing machine. What is a foolproof method? So when we talk about binding a quilt or a quilt project or whatever, something that you're attaching some type of binding to raw edges to enclose them, doing it completely by machine. So most of y'all probably know traditionally the way a lot of us, I would say probably even most of us do it, is by stitching the binding to one side of the quilt and then folding it to the back and hand stitching it into place. Not everybody can stand to sit there and take those little invisible binding stitches to attach it on the back. So you can do it completely by machine. There's a lot of different methods to do it. Surely I've done a video on this sometime. I can't remember when, and I have like short videos that I've done also, I think on Instagram and on Facebook, my reels, I think it's on YouTube Shorts as well. My favorite way to do it if I am going to attach quilt binding by machine is to do an actual zigzag stitch. Because if you know anything about binding, you know that when you bind and come across, if you're stitching from the front side in the ditch and your binding width is not all super consistent on the back end, you know what happens, right? Sometimes you catch it and sometimes you don't, and you don't know until you're done with the whole section and you flip it over and you're like, dang it, I'm missing a chunk here and I'm missing a chunk here, right? That's the worst. So when you do a zigzag, you don't have that problem because the zigzag is going to go in, out, in, out, in, out. So you're catching a little bit of both. I personally like to zigzag stitch binding when I make baby quilts to give to people that are going to be used. And by used, I mean washed, dirtied, throw down in a park, in a beach, wherever, throw it in the wash, throw it in the dryer. I do that because I don't want, one, little pinky toes or little fingers to get in between the different stitches in the binding, or also over time, because it's just one strand of thread and it's like an in, out, kind of like an invisible ladder type of stitch. It just doesn't hold as well for something that's going to be used as much as a baby quilt. If it's going to have a lot of washing and drying, I have found that having a zigzag stitched on binding is like, it ain't never going to come off, ever. The hand stitch binding, I personally like to hand stitch binding, but the ones that I did early on like that for my kids when they were little, they do, like the binding just comes off. So then you have to go in, go pull it out, find like a beginning point, tie a little knot to secure it, and then go back in and hand stitch again to close up the area that has ripped apart over time. And so for kids and for quilts that are like picnic quilts or beach quilts that I make, I absolutely go in and just do the zigzag stitching, and it holds like a dream. Okay. Claudia says she enjoys binding and piecing the quilts. Hand basting sounds like it would sure work for me, Cheryl says. I'm going to try it. Definitely give it a try, Cheryl, and let me know your thoughts. Let me know what you think. Okay? All right. Yeah, Tamara says I should try zigzag stitch for the binding. Absolutely. Now, the tip that I will give for zigzag stitching is, you know, when you select on your sewing machine a zigzag stitch, every machine is going to be a little bit different. Some default to like a really wide zigzag, but it's really tight, more like a satin stitch. Other machines will default to like a narrower width zigzag and then more spaced out. So you need to play around with that and adjust. But for me, I want to say I usually go with like 3.5 millimeters wide, side to side in the width of the zigzag, and then the same like 3 or 3.5 in stitch width. Okay, so something like that, because you don't want to go a really tight zigzag on the binding. It's going to ripple, because think about it. You're stitching through multiple layers of fabric just at the binding, and then you're going through the whole quilt sandwich. So if you're filling that in with really tight zigzags, you're packing in way more thread in a smaller amount of space. It's going to be a disaster. Don't do it. Don't do it. You're going to think of me. Spread those zigzags out, and then don't go super wide either, you know, depending on the width of your binding strips. But play around with 3.5 and 3.5 or 3 and 3.5, something like that. Okay. Oh, and Janelle says self-binding baby quilts. That too. That also works really good. Yeah, so Janelle says she zigzags on her no binding baby quilt. So she cuts the backing bigger, folds it in, you can miter the corners, and then on that last fold when it comes in, then she zigzags around it. So the backing fabric comes over the top, over the front part of the quilt sandwich as the binding, and that way you don't have a whole separate binding. That makes really good sense too. All right, so let's keep going. Next question. I have two questions here from Karen and from Annie G, and they are asking questions about zippers. So Karen's question is, can you show how to make the zipper ends not stick up? And Annie G says, when I'm sewing a pouch, the zipper ends always come out wonky. How can I get them to look straight with a clean look when the bag is closed? So I just wanted to kind of lump these two together because I often get questions like this. And what I did was pull some samples here to share with y'all. Let's go ahead and give them the over-the-shoulder camera shot here, just so I can kind of show them what's what. Let me grab some water. How did I drink almost this whole thing already? Okay, these are a couple of pouches from some of my classes. However, I have a good bit of free YouTube tutorials too. I will say, because this is our 200th episode, if you're watching us live or watching the recording within the next 24 hours, we are running a kind of a celebratory site-wide sale where everything on the site is 15% off right now. You don't need a coupon code. The only things that are excluded are the sewing machine, the sneaker soles and kits and supply kits for the sneaker making class, and the latest class because it's still on sale. That tumbling frames quilt is still on sale for 20 bucks off until tomorrow. Everything else, all these classes included, they're all on sale for 15% off only for 24 hours, kind of to celebrate our 200th episode. So if you add a qualifying product or course or club or whatever to your cart, at checkout, you'll see the discount there applied. And I think the coupon code, you don't need the code because it automatically applies, but it's like WIP Wednesday 200, something like that. Okay, so when we're talking about these zipper pouches, this is the part that these ladies are talking about, okay? The corners here. I remember because when I first made a zipper pouch, and you'd see them a lot. I mean, obviously I can't make these look bad. They already were done correctly. But if you know what I'm talking about, it's like these corners. Let me see if I can push this in. It's almost like, oh yeah, like this. Okay. And you'll see them. Sometimes I see people selling them looking like this at craft fairs, and that's how you can kind of tell that they're like new-ish. There's so many techniques now to doing for making zipper pouches. So if you see it look like that, where it's like missing a corner, or it's like a little bit dented up, okay, that's like you're just making the zipper pouch, you're adding you're adding the lining and you're just going through. But because the fabrics come together with the zipper tape at the ends here, you have to like be intentional with the technique, I would say, of how you're going to finish that portion. So there are so many tutorials, myself included, tons of people on YouTube on how to make zipper pouches with, you know, different finishings here. So you get a proper like 90-degree angle right here. And so that the zipper ends, the zipper goes completely flat from end to end, okay? And that it looks good, okay? It's not like squished in on the corners. So I would recommend either having a look at any of the classes that I have that feature zipper pouches. We're always gonna show you how to have some type of finishing technique on the zipper ends, or the pouch, right? Because there's different techniques. There's pouches where the zipper doesn't end here. It might come out of the seam and stick out so that you have like a tail of a zipper to hold on to. There's lots of different ways to do it, but the key I would say for this is that you need to be following a pattern or a tutorial or a class or something where they are specifically focused on showing you what to do at these ends. You can't just say, hey, you're gonna take the exterior, stitch it to the zipper tape, grab the lining, stitch it to the zipper tape, do the same thing on the other side, and then sew down the sides and leave a hole. You have to like show exactly what you're doing in these areas, which obviously I do in all my tutorials and in my courses. But this here, in case anybody's interested, this comes in 3 sizes. This is one of our courses that obviously is on sale right now. Like I said, all the classes are. This is my Worthington zipper pouch. And on this class, it includes 3 different sizes. And I show you how to make the template so that you can play around with how you come up with the shape for this type of a pouch, so that you can play around and, you know, make it bigger, make it smaller, like a lot of my students did. Okay? So anyways, these feature a zipper tab end on them so that they finish like that. So you can see, like I did on this one, I used a contrasting fabric that kind of ties into a little bit of the darker color here, okay, to give you like a little pop of color, like an accent portion there. This one, I used one of the fabrics here for this kind of negative space, kind of neutral looking pouch. And that fabric is one of the same fabrics from the scraps here. These are all individual patchwork units, so you can make it patchworky like that too with chunks. And then this one is just obviously one chunk of fabric, but I use the same fabric for the zipper tab ends. So all that to say, you can't just make a zipper pouch and just slap the stuff together. There are techniques either to finish the zipper tape, and you have to have the right measurement so that you miss the bulk on the ends. Because that's another problem I often see with beginners, is that yes, they know how to prepare the ends of their zipper with zipper tab ends, but then they go in and stitch over the zipper tab ends on the sides. It's gonna look a hot mess because now you're going through way more bulk. We're trying to avoid going through the bulk of the zipper tape. And if we add a zipper tab end of fabric, this fabric is doubled and quadrupled up there because it allows us to get kind of a finished look on the ends of the zipper. You can't be stitching over that. It's gonna be even worse, okay? So all that to say, look up some zipper pouch tutorials on YouTube. Just type in Crafty Gemini zipper pouch, and all my zipper pouches, different shapes, sizes, and all that are going to pop up. And then just practice, 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 practice. This other little one here on the zipper tab ends, notice this is still super flat. Okay, this is my Bella Buddy bag. It's still flat here, but this uses a slightly different technique, still with zipper tab ends, but we also go in and attached both the hardware on this side to loop it to and a little wristlet strap here. So you can see how just learning a few more techniques, you can easily turn in just like a basic rectangular or square zippered pouch into a little wristlet or even a little purse for a little girl if she kind of wants to carry it like that. Okay, so different ways to do it. Lots of options and a lot of tutorials that I have out there. Okay, so that's that. 1, 2, and 3. Let's do another giveaway. Let me set these aside. 1, 2. The next giveaway, and I'll go over the giveaway stuff first while you pick who's who. we are giving away a bundle of my friend Sarah Lawson from So Sweetness's patterns. So 4 different bag making patterns here. Okay, these are the Amethyst Project bag. This is a big bag. It has mesh, it has zippered pouches, it has like elastic across the top and when you open the lid of it there, so you can put pens and stuff like an artist carry-all case, okay? But obviously we can use it for all our sewing stuff. Camp Stitch-A-Lot bag. This is a good one to take to classes or retreats. It has a little pocket on the side there that you can fit your cutting mat to take with you to retreats. Then this one is the Crimson and Clover train cases that come in 3 sizes, small, medium, and large. And then the other one is the Bye Bye Love bag. A big tote there with a handle on it, nice and big, and it has two finished sizes, a small and a large. So 4 So Sweetness patterns and a Crafty Gemini tumbler. I'll take this one out of here. It's a little 12-ounce tumbler with our Crafty Gemini logo on it, the lid. Okay, so that's the bundle for that one. 4 bag making patterns and a tumbler. All right, go for it. I'm ready. Mary L9601. You are the winner. Hi, Mary. Mary L9601. Yes. So, Mary, number 3, winner number 3 for today's 200th episode of WIP Wednesday. Go ahead and send us an email at bea@craftygemini.com with your name and mailing address so we can get bundle number 3 out to you. So congratulations. Excuse me, my water. And let's keep moving. See if I can get through all these. Okay. Congratulations. Make sure you post pictures when you make those, Mary. All right. Next one. I have a question here from Renee that says, when you're top stitching, how do you know where to place the top stitching on the seam? What a great question. She says, is there a standard top stitch allowance? For example, if the seam is 1/4 inch, where should the top stitching go? So this is a great question that I feel like people just wonder, or they just follow the directions, because, you know, I love to tell y'all, this is the stitch length, this is the seam allowance, this is the stitch width, the needle should be at this position. So I try to kind of tell you all the different things. But when it comes to top stitching, I think of it a little bit differently. It's more like an optional decorative type of thing. It can be construction based, like it can be some top stitching that you do to hold certain things together depending on the project. But for the most part, when we say we're top stitching something, it's like to add some decorative stitching to the outside, or in the case of bags and things like that with puffy interfacings, usually we're doing it to hold and kind of squish down the bulk. So I'll give you an example. Let's give everybody my over-the-shoulder camera shot here, and I'll show them. I just pulled a couple projects that feature top stitching, so I can kind of show you what I'm talking about here. So for this, for example, this is just a sew together bag. I have a step-by-step video course. If you have this pattern and you have struggled to make it, or you have yet to make it, check out my class, because today would be a good day to jump on it since it's 15% off. It's the Sew Together bag by Sew Demented. And for example, the binding that's done along the edge here is top stitched because it's done by machine. Okay. This is one of those cases where we top stitch, but it's the construction part, right? Because it needs to be held down so that everything is together, because it connects here. It's loose on the ends and then it connects to the body of the bag and comes around. Okay. So for something like this, yeah, depending on what strips you cut, how wide it is, what it called for, that's going to determine how far down from here you are doing this stitching. Okay. So, but that's still top stitching. All right. Top stitching in here on these pockets. We have a line of gray stitching there. Well, here, because these interior pouches are both made up of a fabric here on the outside that you can see the green throughout, but it also has a lining fabric. In this case, and in most pouches and bags and stuff, there's interfacing in between there. And so we top stitch for 2 reasons, or can be for these 2 reasons. One, to keep everything like the lining fabric from coming up. You know, everybody has had this before on clothes, on bags, on anything, where you go to close that zipper and the lining comes up and it catches in the zipper teeth and now your zipper is stuck. Okay, so the top stitching in something like this with a zipper closure is going to help you keep the fabrics down and away, assuming you pressed it before you top stitch, right? Because if I press really good this fabric down from the zipper and this fabric on the inside lining down from the zipper, and then I stitch it, it can't go nowhere because the stitches are holding it exactly where I pressed it to be. And so that's why you can see a little bit of the zipper tape and the zipper teeth sticking out, but the fabric is far from it. It's not going to lift up and come up and get in my way from opening and closing that zipper. Okay, so that's one reason. The other reason is in something like this, and this is my Flora crossbody bag, where this one features some soft vinyl from So Hungry Hippie, from my friends Natalie and Ramel over there. You can check them out at sohungryhippie.com. This is made with an even bulkier interfacing than what we used here. This is done with foam stabilizer. So the foam, you can see, empty, it gives shape and body to this, even though it's a small pouch. It's squishy, there's foam all throughout. And so in this case, same as here though, top stitching. But because I use the foam is way bulkier than a fleece or a cotton woven fusible interfacing. The top stitching around here is both to hold that lining down and in place, but also to squish that foam there. Because otherwise, and you would see it when you got to this step in the construction process, that lining would be sticking out up top here. Because the seam allowance of sewing the exterior with foam to the lining, that foam is heavier than that lining fabric in terms of gravity and like where it's gonna hang, and so it lifts it up. So y'all that have done bags with foam know what I'm talking about, where we have to carefully kind of push that lining fabric in, put our clip so that it holds it there, and then if you took them off, it would just go bloop, and it pops right out. So you have to put your clips and then immediately, well, after a little bit, but you go and stitch it down so that it holds right where you want it to, and it doesn't let that lining pop up or the bulk of that foam stabilizer push up on that seam. Okay, so that's here. For the top stitching I did around the top here, the flap, same thing. I want to keep that lining fabric down where it needs to be. I want to squish the foam, and I'm just giving it a decorative finish. So here, I don't think it would have mattered if I would have come in 1/4 of an inch or even a little bit bulkier or like a little bit bigger than that. But I prefer to have it closer to the edge to give it kind of more of a fine finish there and try to keep this the underside of the flap, which I use a soft vinyl, which is thicker than cotton, right? To keep it kind of down and under where it needs to sit. So you kind of have to analyze and think, what am I trying to achieve with the top stitching? Is it just to like add a pop of a different color so the finishings look good? Or am I trying to hold some bulk down and away? So when you analyze that, then you can more easily, I think, determine how wide of a seam allowance you're using for the top stitching. Okay, and you'll see it, because if you go too big on the seam allowance for the top stitching with foam, you'll see like if the seam allowance you use for the top stitching is further away than what the seam allowance is of the seam that's under there, the puffiness of the foam or the fusible fleece is going to puff up through it. So like you're not catching it, and so it's going to look really clunky here. Okay, so you have to think about those things there. All right. Okay, so that's that. And then when it comes to garment sewing, a lot of this stuff is just for finishes, right? Because sometimes you don't even have interfacings in the layers. It's just like a matter of holding maybe the inside lining or a facing down into place. And sometimes we just do it with a pop of color because we want it to look a little bit more decorative. And I'll kind of show you a sample here because I have a top right here that I can show you. So this is the color block set by Matchy Matchy Sewing Club. And so you can see that it's like a patchwork top made with really, really thin single gauze cotton fabric. And so the top stitching here, I know it's black and you probably can't see it, but we'll pretend. Or let me try and get it. Okay, I top stitched on the black fabric with the aqua colored thread. Can you even see that? I can't tell on my camera. Hold on. Yeah, you can see it. So you see that aqua colored stitching there? I use a thread this color on the black for top stitching, okay? And so the top stitching is holding the seam allowance that direction, because you see this crisscross here? It's a 4-patch block. And so just like we would do on a quilt for a block, a quilt block, okay, I had to abut the seams and send them in different directions. And so then if it's not pressed and held in that place, those seams are going to start flipping, flopping. And you don't want that like right in the middle of your shirt. You know what I mean? When you're wearing it. And so I top stitched these guys down. So here I used the coordinating or contrasting color for the thread so that it matches. So that's kind of what I'm pointing at to say a decorative top stitching, but also functional in this sense. There's no interfacing. It's a really thin fabric, but now I want no bulk. So the top stitching in this case is both for a pop of color, but also to smooth and keep this fully flat so I don't have to deal with seams that lift up right at the center of my shirt. Does that make sense? Okay. Hopefully it does. So that's that. Ooh, boy, I can talk a good bit. All right, next question is from Pat, and Pat says, I have lots of 50 weight thread. Do you think bags will hold up using it, or should I invest in 40 weight? 50 weight thread is absolutely going to hold just fine. She didn't mention whether it was a cotton or polyester thread. Excuse me. Y'all know that for my bags and pouches, I tend to stress all my pouches. If it's like a little bit of room, I'm going to pack it all the way till it's full. I don't know why, but that's what I do. And so I like to use a 50 or 40 weight polyester, like a good quality 100% polyester thread for my bags. But 50 weight thread is good. It's not super thin either, you know, like being too thin to hold. I think if you're using shorter stitch lengths in your straight stitch and your construction seams, you're going to be plenty fine. Now, even for like a big tote bag, I mean, I think you'll be fine. It's just personal preference. And I tend to lean towards polyester because it is a man-made thread, man-made fiber, and it tends to be stronger than the natural fibers of cotton. Okay? But yeah, I think if that's all you have, go ahead and use it. You'll be fine. Next question is from Rachel, and Rachel says, my sewing machine has trouble sewing over bulky seams. Raise your hand if your machine too struggles sewing over bulky seams. She says, do you have tips to make sewing over bulky seams easier? There's a lot of different things that you can do. It's really going to depend at the end of the day of whether or not your machine can even sew bulky seams, but a couple ways to kind of troubleshoot it and help your little machine out are going to be to, one, use a walking foot. If you have one for your machine, you can also look up, you know, whether your machine is low shank or high shank and just buy like a generic one so that you can try it out and see if it really helps before you spend a lot of money on like a name brand, you know, walking foot for your machine. If it doesn't work, it's not going to work. You know what I mean? If you have like an entry level machine that already is making all these weird sounds when you're sewing over bulk, you're probably going to use it to the end of its capacity, and it would be probably helpful, especially if you know you're going to be wanting to sew a lot of bulky items, thicker bags, thicker materials, plus interfacings. You know, you might want to just invest in a more powerful machine like a semi-industrial Juki or something. Okay, a walking foot, using a bigger needle. If you only have one type of needle and you're using like universal 80-12 for everything, you're going to want to change that needle. Go up, go bigger, try a denim needle, a top stitch needle, something that's a little bit bigger and sharper also to help your machine cut through the bulk will help. And then of course, y'all hear me, if you're my students, you hear me say this all the time, and that is to lengthen the stitch length a little bit so that your machine can pull more fabric through with the feed dogs, versus like staying in the same spot with a super tiny stitch and you're trying to stitch through bulk. The bulkier the stuff, the slightly longer you want to elongate that straight stitch length to help the machine feed through more. Okay? So that's that. And that's 1, 2, 3. I'm ready for another giveaway. A box bundle here. Here, we have a giveaway. This one is going to be another bundle similar to what Zena got that's in a bag. But this one has some fabric in it, a couple little notepads, the Crafty Gemini exclusive notebook, a 5x10 ruler, one of my 5x10 rulers, and then all this little Crafty Gemini kind of branded stuff. You got the seam ripper, the little retractable seam ripper. I love these guys. We have those for sale on the site too. A pen, a measuring tape that you can take to your fabric store if you need to measure the stretch in your knit fabrics. A pack of my Crafty Gemini Favorites Sulky collection of 12-weight cotton threads. And then a couple of other little notions and knickknacks in here. And the sticker and all that. Okay? You can give me another username when you're ready so we can call out the next winner of this one. Carrie, like Carrie. Carrie. MAC. Macfalda. Okay. So this is from a Facebook viewer who's tuning in live, Carrie Macfalda. This is number 4. So, Carrie, if you're watching us on Facebook, make sure you send an email to bea@craftygemini.com. Let us know you're Carrie. You won the number 4 giveaway for today's show, our 200th episode of WIP Wednesday. Make sure you send us your mailing address so we can get that box of goodies out to you. So, congratulations to you. And thanks for watching us on Facebook. All right, the last couple questions I have. One is from Brenda, and she says, with knit fabric, would it be a good idea to use a walking foot to help the fabric stay in place? So yes, yes, and yes. I used to have a brother machine over a decade ago, and the only way I could get it to sew through like the lighter weight cotton spandex knits when my kids were babies was to put on the walking foot on it. And it really helps because remember the walking foot, and I don't have mine right here, but the walking foot has feed dogs on top. The same way that our sewing machine has feed dogs on the bottom. Yep, I do. Let me grab this one. So the same way that the sewing machine, whoop, light it back up, I'm here. The same way that your sewing machine has feed dogs underneath, that's what's helping feed the fabric through every time your machine needle goes up and down and takes a stitch. This has the feed dogs on top. So think about it. If the fabric is stretchy or if there's multiple layers of fabric, now you have the help of feed dogs under and feed dogs on top. So it helps keep the fabric feeding through more evenly. Has that ever happened to you where you're like feeding it through and then the layers start to shift? The feed dogs are pulling through, there's not enough chomp on it, and then it's so thick that the top layer goes one way and the feed dogs are pulling the other way. That can be fixed with a walking foot too. Okay, but because the fabric stretches, I found on that other machine that I used to use, having a walking foot in it, it would help feed evenly from top and bottom. So yes, if you have tried sewing knit fabrics and you were like, this is not working, if you have a walking foot, try it on and give it another go and see if that helps you. Next question is from Julie. Julie says, when I was a kid, we always used a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now, everything I see is a 1/4 inch. She says, when you use that in a quilt, after washing, it frays out. Why did they switch? So I thought this was interesting because if you think about quilting, not that I know the whole history of quilting, but using scraps, using smaller pieces, the amount of precision that is required does not really go in line with a lot of bulk at seams. So using a 1/4 inch seam allowance narrow like that, I find, I don't know what kind of fabric maybe she was using when she says that washing the quilt, that 1/4 inch seam allowance frays out. Y'all know we use scant 1/4 inch seam allowances, which is just like 1 or 2 threads narrower than a true 1/4 inch. But if you go narrower than that, then yes, especially if the fabric has a loose weave, you definitely run the risk of it fraying out, okay? But at a 1/4 inch, I feel like it's solid as long as one, you're using a short enough stitch length that it's going to hold for even a looser weave cotton. It allows us to have like flatter seams, more precision when you have a lot of seams joining in these quilt blocks that have like a bunch of pieces in there. And then of course you just have less bulk. The quilt is supposed to lie flat. So even if you're adding in all these pieces, can you imagine if we made a quilt that had like 1/2 inch seam allowances? That would just be crazy bulky. I think that's just would not work like that. Whereas if you think about sewing garments, it's very helpful, right? And beneficial to have these larger seam allowances because you can try it on and let it out whatever the seam allowance is. So you're kind of building that in there to have that extra insurance, if you will, to like, oh, it's a little too tight. Okay, let it out. We can go all the way down, you know, to a 1/4 inch or whatever, 3/8 inch seam allowance. I have a little bit more here, wiggle room to work with. So you see why a lot of those big sewing pattern companies, you know, call for 5/8 inch seam allowance. When you go from quilting to that, you see that huge chunk. And to us, I feel like the immediate thing is that's so wasteful. Why would I cut all this fabric out and then sew just to have this huge chunk? But you got to think about it. You're probably going to need to fit it somehow, you know, so you want to be able to let it out somewhere, take it in a little bit more. And once you finalize it, then yeah, feel free to just surge up the seams and get rid of the bulk. But that's built in there for that, you know? So I'm curious to see, you know, what exactly she was talking about with the quilt after washing it out. I find a 1/4 inch, obviously people have been doing this for hundreds and hundreds of years. The 1/4 inch is fine. I just wouldn't go too much narrower than that because if it's a loose weave fabric especially, you do run the risk of it fraying. But especially if you're doing heavy quilting, it should hold everything good. So that's that. So when she says like, why did they switch? I don't know that they switched. I think people have just been doing different seam allowances for the purpose of what they're making, you know? So I just thought that that was an interesting question. But yeah, the 1/4 inch definitely allows us more precision to lay it flat. And then for clothes, you need the built-in room. All right, next question. I think this is the last question I have for today. This is from Dot, and Dot asks, what is the best way to keep cut material edges, like raw material edges, from fraying while you're working on a project? So that's going to depend a lot on the type of fabric. But if you're using like 100% cotton or like quilting cottons to make something, for me, y'all know I like to starch, and that helps keep the fabric a little bit stiffer. So like less manipulation of those raw edges. I find that it keeps them a little bit crisper and more cut. Another thing you can do is grab some pinking shears without cutting too much into the edges of the fabric, right? Because you don't want to lose your seam allowance, but you can pink the edges of the fabric, and that will definitely help it fray less, but it's obviously one extra step. The other thing you can do is zigzag stitch or serge it, or use like a full overlock stitch on your sewing machine even to finish off the edges. I know people that like finish the edges of the pattern pieces first and then go in and sew. I personally don't really like to do that because I feel like once I go in and serge or whatever, if I'm serging, I'm cutting some away. So I can't really go from the outermost edge and use the true seam allowance because then the project is going to be a little bit smaller. Does that make sense? So I prefer to sew first and then serge most of the time. But her question was like, how do you keep it from fraying while you're working on the project? One is try not to touch it too much. Don't be stretching and messing with those raw edges that much. But pinking or doing like some type of a finishing on the seam are going to be your best bets. But yeah, try not to mess with the raw edges that much. That's what I have to tell myself because y'all know that I grab everything super hard and I tend to mess with things and distort things. So I have to take special precautions to not do that. Okay. So that's that. And then we have our last giveaway of the day. This giveaway is for an HTV Ront Mini Heat Press 3. And I have mine here. This one is in purple. So you're going to get the purple one, whoever the winner is. And I'll show you mine real quick. It's like a little iron. You can use it as an iron. They call it a mini heat press. But it has the settings here for you to turn it on, increase the temperature and all that. It comes with a little silicone base. Look how cute. Here, electric obviously plugs up. And then it also comes with a little pouch to put it in. So mine is blue, but the winner of this last giveaway of today's 200th episode is going to get a purple one, a super cute purple one. All right. You have a name for me. Oh, you lost it. Amanda's asking, I'll answer this question right quick while you look. Amanda's asking, can you turn off the blade on a serger? You can. At least all the models I have had, you can either like disengage it or disable it. Yeah, but there should be a setting.
It's
Terry Joe Benson, 150 something something. 1504. Okay, so Terry Joe, you are the winner of the HTV Ront Mini Heat Press 3. So make sure you email us at bea@craftygemini.com with your name, mailing address. Let us know you won number 5, Terry Joe, and we will mail this out to you. That was fun. All right, so we did 5 giveaways, and I answered a ton of questions. So hopefully that was helpful. Thank you all for tuning in. Hopefully you learned a little something from hearing me chat about my answers to those questions. And thanks everybody for tuning in. I definitely appreciate all the hearts, all the congratulations on our 200th live episode here on Crafty Gemini. Thanks everybody for tuning in. I hope you find some time to do some crafty stuff this week. Remember that my tumbling frames quilt, the price is going up tomorrow night. Tomorrow is January 29th at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time, 2026. The price is going up. So if you do want to get in on that quilt class, you have access to 9 videos right now. A bonus is going up on Friday. And then, I don't know, check the calendar to see when the next batch of videos is going up. But you can start working on it literally this weekend if you join us today or tomorrow. Okay? Thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your week. And I will see you in the next video. Bye.